I was sitting on my porch one quiet evening, watching the sun sink behind the trees, when I noticed the old house across the street. It had been empty for months, maybe even years. The paint peeled in long strips, the shutters hung loose, and the yard was a jungle of weeds. But that night, I saw a light flicker inside. At first, I thought maybe kids had broken in, messing around with flashlights. But then I caught a shadow moving slowly past one of the upstairs windows. Someone was in there, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt this pull in my chest, like I had to know who it was. The next morning, I baked a small batch of banana bread. That's what my mom used to do whenever someone new moved into our neighborhood. She'd say, "Bread breaks walls." And it always worked. People softened when you showed up with something warm in your hands. I walked across the street, balancing the still warm loaf on a plate. The porch creaked under my feet, and I knocked gently on the faded door. For a moment, I wasn't sure anyone would answer. Then it opened just enough for a face to peek through. A girl, maybe 16 or 17. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious, but also scared. "Hi," I said, giving a small smile. "I live across the street. I thought I'd bring this over, just to welcome you." She blinked at me, then at the bread. "We don't need charity." Her voice was flat, defensive. "Oh, it's not charity," I said quickly. "It's just bread. Honestly, I made too much, and if it stays in my house, I'll eat the whole thing myself. Trust me, I'm saving myself here." For a second, I thought she might shut the door, but instead, she hesitated, then pulled it open wider. That's when I saw how empty the house looked. No furniture, just boxes stacked in corners, blankets on the floor. It didn't take much to put two and two together. Her hand shook as she reached for the plate. She muttered a quiet thanks, almost too soft to hear, and started to close the door. Something in me wanted to stop her. "What's your name?" I asked. She froze, then looked back at me. "Samantha," she whispered. "Well, Samantha, I'm Daniel. If you or your family ever need anything, I'm right across the street." That was it. The door closed, but something about her lingered with me. The next few days, I kept noticing little things. A boy, younger than her, sitting on the porch steps with his knees pulled to his chest. A woman, their mother, I guessed, who slipped out late at night, always looking over her shoulder. The lights inside the house flickered, like maybe they didn't always pay the bill on time. One evening, I saw Samantha sitting on the porch steps, hugging her knees the same way her brother had. I grabbed 2 mugs of hot chocolate and walked over. She looked up when she saw me, guarded again. "Why are you always coming over here?" I handed her one of the mugs, because I figure everyone deserves hot chocolate, especially when it's this cold out. She stared at the steaming mug, then finally took it. Her hands wrapped around it like she hadn't held warmth in a long time. We sat in silence for a while, sipping. Finally, she said, "We didn't want to come here. She said it was safer." "Safer than where?" I asked gently. She bit her lip and shook her head. "Doesn't matter." I didn't push. Instead, I said, "Sometimes starting over feels like the hardest thing in the world, but sometimes it ends up being the best." She gave me a long look, like she was trying to figure out if I was for real. Then she whispered, "You sound like my dad." And just like that, her eyes welled up. She turned away quickly, brushing at her face. "You don't have to hide it," I said softly. "Crying just means you're human." She let out a shaky laugh, almost bitter. Dad always said that too. Something twisted in my chest. I didn't know their story yet, but I knew one thing. These kids needed someone. And for some reason, life had decided that someone was going to be me. The weeks passed, and little by little, Samantha opened up. Her brother, Tyler, was 8, with a smile that could light up the darkest night. Their mom, Michelle, worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day and a late-night shift at a diner. The dad? Gone. Left without warning 2 years ago, and they'd been drifting since. Money was tight. Food was tighter. But Samantha was tougher than she looked. She kept Tyler fed, made sure he got to school, even helped him with homework. She had this strength, but beneath it, I could see how heavy the weight was. One night, I found Tyler outside, crying quietly. He said he missed his dad. He said he didn't understand why he had to leave. I sat with him, letting him talk, letting him cry, and when he finally wore himself out, I carried him inside like he was my own kid. Michelle caught me in the hallway. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, but she still managed a grateful smile. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Yeah," I said, "but I want to." Slowly, their house started to feel less empty. I'd bring over meals, not out of pity, but because sharing food felt right. I fixed their leaky faucet, replaced the broken porch light, even helped Tyler build a birdhouse for school. And through it all, Samantha kept watching me, sometimes with suspicion, sometimes with something softer. One night, after Tyler was asleep and Michelle was working late, Samantha and I sat on the porch again. The air was crisp, the stars scattered above us. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked suddenly. "Because I know what it feels like to need someone," I said. She tilted her head. "You?" I nodded. After my wife passed, I didn't think I'd ever get up again. I was just existing. But then neighbors, friends, even strangers stepped in. They helped me find my feet. It's the only reason I'm still here. And now, I guess I just want to pass it on. Samantha was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "Maybe we needed you to move across the street." Her words stayed with me, wrapping around my heart. That winter, we built something together. Not a perfect family, not even a traditional one, but something real. A bond, a thread connecting all of us. And little did I know, that bond would soon be tested in ways none of us expected. The first heavy snow of winter came earlier than usual that year. The world outside looked like it had been dipped in sugar, white and glistening under the soft glow of the streetlights. I was shoveling my driveway when I noticed Tyler standing barefoot on his porch, his little arms wrapped around himself, shivering. I dropped the shovel and hurried over. "Tyler, where are your shoes, buddy?" He shrugged, his teeth chattering. I was looking for Sammy. I opened the door and ushered him inside. The house was drafty, the heat barely working, and the air smelled faintly of something burning. Samantha was in the kitchen, frantically trying to get the stove to light. "Gas line's acting up again," she muttered. "Mom said the landlord promised to fix it," but she trailed off, frustration written all over her face. I looked around, taking in the thin blankets, the flickering lamp, the sound of wind whistling through a crack in the window. This wasn't just a bad night. It was survival. "Pack some stuff," I said firmly. "What?" "Clothes, blankets, whatever you need. You're staying in my place tonight." Samantha's eyes widened. "We can't. Mom wouldn't. Your mom wants you safe. That's all she wants. Let me help." For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. That night, Tyler fell asleep on my couch, wrapped up in the thickest blanket I owned. Samantha sat beside him, sipping cocoa, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "This feels weird," she admitted quietly. "Weird how?" "Like normal." She gave a small laugh, one that sounded half-broken. I forgot what normal felt like. Her words hit me deep. I wanted to tell her she deserved normal, that she deserved more than just scraping by. But I held back, because sometimes words aren't what people need. Sometimes it's just presence. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, my house became their second home. Michelle was hesitant at first, apologizing constantly, saying they were imposing. But every time, I reassured her. "You're not taking anything from me," I said. "You're giving me something too. A reason." And it was true. I hadn't realized how quiet my life had become until Samantha's laughter filled my kitchen, until Tyler's drawings cluttered my fridge, until Michelle and I found ourselves sharing late-night coffee at the table, talking about everything from bills to dreams. But not everyone saw it that way. One evening, while walking out to get the mail, my neighbor, Mr. Callahan, waved me over. He was the kind of man who noticed everything but said little, so when he spoke, I listened. "Dan," he said slowly, lowering his voice, "people are starting to talk." "Talk about what?" "About you. About that family." He shifted uncomfortably. "You're a good man, but folks don't always see it that way. Single guy, young girl, her brother. It's enough to get rumors going. I felt my stomach drop. I knew the world could be cruel, but hearing it put into words made me sick. I'm just helping them, I said firmly. I know that, Callahan said, but not everyone will. Just be careful. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of other people's judgment pressed heavy on my chest. But then I thought of Tyler's smile, of Samantha's guarded eyes finally softening, of Michelle's whispered thank yous. And I knew, let them talk, because doing nothing would have been worse. Spring came, melting the snow, filling the air with the scent of fresh grass. And with it came changes. Michelle picked up more shifts, slowly catching up on bills. Samantha, once withdrawn, started joining after-school clubs, her laughter more frequent. Tyler just bloomed like a flower that had finally found sunlight. One evening, as we sat in my backyard, grilling burgers, Samantha turned to me. "Do you think people can choose their family?" she asked suddenly. "Of course," I said. "Family isn't just blood. It's the people who stay, who show up when it matters." She looked at me then, really looked, and whispered, "Then I think you're ours." My throat tightened. I looked at Michelle, who was watching silently, her eyes glistening. She gave a small nod, and I knew she felt it too. Not everything was easy. There were still nights Michelle came home exhausted. Still days when Samantha carried more than a teenager should. Still moments when Tyler cried for a dad who wasn't there. But there was also warmth now, laughter, dinners shared around my table, homework done at my counter, birthday, candles lit in my kitchen. We weren't perfect, but we were real. Months later, one of Tyler's school projects asked him to write about his hero. He stood in front of his class, clutching his paper, and read aloud. "My hero is my neighbor, Daniel. He helps my mom, he takes care of my sister, and he makes me feel safe. He's not my dad, but he's my family." When Samantha told me this later, I couldn't hold back the tears, because in all my life, I'd never felt so seen. Looking back, I think about that night I saw the light in their window. I could have ignored it. I could have stayed on my porch, kept to myself, lived quietly. But I didn't. I crossed the street, and crossing that street changed everything. If you've been listening this far, thank you. Stories like this remind us that kindness matters, that showing up can change someone's whole world. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to like the video, hit subscribe, and check out the other stories waiting for you. You won't regret it. When I was 28, I moved back to my hometown after nearly a decade away. Life had taken me in circles, jobs that didn't last, a relationship that ended quietly, in a city that never really felt like home. Coming back wasn't part of the plan, but sometimes plans collapse, and you just end up where you're meant to be. The first night back, I stayed at my mom's house. It felt strange walking through the door of the place I'd grown up in, the smell of old pine floors and the faint trace of lavender from her laundry. Everything was familiar, but different, like stepping into an old photograph where the colors had faded. She was happy to see me. Too happy, almost like she'd been waiting for the day I'd finally give up on the outside world and come home. Over dinner, she kept asking about my life, and though I gave her short answers, I could see the relief on her face. But what really stayed with me wasn't her. It was the house next door, the Thompsons' place. When I was a kid, that house had always been full of noise, birthday parties spilling out into the yard, kids running across the lawn, the smell of barbecue in summer. But now it looked tired. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the yard had gone wild. The next morning, as I was drinking coffee on the porch, I saw a girl standing on the Thompson steps, struggling with a grocery bag almost as big as her. She couldn't have been older than 12. Her hair was in a messy braid, her sweater 2 sizes too big. I recognized her. Lily. She was the youngest of the Thompson kids. I remembered her faintly as a toddler clinging to her mom's leg during neighborhood cookouts. But now, she looked different. Small, tired, older than she should have been. The bag slipped from her hands, and it can rolled across the sidewalk. Without thinking, I walked over. "You okay there?" I asked gently. She startled, eyes wide, but then nodded quickly. "Yeah, just heavy. I picked up the can and handed it to her. Need a hand? She hesitated, then whispered, thanks. That's when I met her grandmother. The front door creaked open, and out came Mrs. Thompson. Except she wasn't Mrs. Thompson. She was frielier, thinner, her movements slow. I realized then it was Lily's grandmother, not her mother. Thank you, the older woman said softly, her voice shaking. Lily does so much already. I keep telling her to wait for me, but she never listens. Lily blushed, shrugging. It's fine, Grandma. Something about the way she said it, the way she carried herself, told me this girl was used to being more than just a kid. Over the next few weeks, I kept noticing them. Lily lugging bags of groceries. Lily mowing the lawn that was almost too big for her. Lily helping her grandmother up the steps when her knees gave out. Always Lily, and always that sense that she was carrying a weight no 12-year-old should. I started helping in small ways. Carrying groceries, fixing the broken porch rail, clearing snow from their driveway. Every time, Lily would thank me shyly, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to accept kindness. One afternoon, as I was tightening the hinges on her screen door, I asked, "So, where's everyone else?" She froze. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said quietly, "It's just us." Her mom, I learned later, had passed away a few years back. Her dad wasn't in the picture. The older siblings had all moved out, scattered to different places, chasing lives of their own. That left Lily and her grandmother alone in the house that used to be full. The more time I spent around them, the more I noticed the cracks. The fridge was often near empty. The heat in the house barely worked. And Lily, she was sharp, resilient, but she carried a kind of tiredness that didn't belong to a child. One evening, I stopped by with some soup my mom had made. Lily opened the door, surprised. "You didn't have to," she said softly. "I know. I told her, but I wanted to." Her grandmother came shuffling into the room, wrapped in a blanket, and the look on her face when she saw the food. I'll never forget it. Gratitude, mixed with something heavier. A quiet shame. People don't usually notice us anymore, she admitted. Something inside me twisted, because I remembered that house when it was alive, when laughter spilled out of every window. And now, seeing it so quiet, so heavy with struggle, it didn't feel right. I started spending more time there, sometimes fixing things, sometimes just talking. And Lily, she slowly began to open up. She told me about her favorite books, about the way she tried to keep her grades up, even though she was tired all the time, about how she missed her mom most at night when the house got too quiet. One evening, as we sat on the porch steps watching fireflies, she said something that stuck with me. "Sometimes I pretend," she whispered, "that everything's still the way it used to be. That mom's inside, cooking dinner. That my brothers are playing in the yard. That it's loud again." Her voice cracked just slightly, and she blinked hard, fighting tears. I wanted to tell her it would be okay. That someday, somehow, it would feel loud again. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat beside her, letting the silence stretch. Because sometimes silence says more than words ever can. By fall, helping them wasn't a choice anymore. It was instinct. I'd mow their lawn without asking. I'd drop off groceries under the excuse that my mom had accidentally cooked too much. I'd sit with her grandmother while Lily finished her homework, so she didn't have to worry about being in two places at once. And little by little, something shifted. Lily smiled more. Her grandmother seemed lighter. Their house, while still quiet, didn't feel quite as lonely. But under all of it, I felt something stirring in me too. I wasn't just helping because it was the right thing to do. I was helping because it mattered to me. Because Lily, with her quiet strength, and her grandmother, with her quiet resilience, had become part of my world. One rainy evening, as I was about to leave, Lily looked up at me and asked, "Why do you keep helping us?" The question caught me off guard. "Because you deserve it," I said honestly. She tilted her head, her braids slipping over her shoulder. "But you don't have to." "No," I admitted, "I don't. But I want to." For a long moment, she studied me, like she was trying to decide if she could really believe it. And then, for the first time since I'd met her again, She smiled without hesitation. A real smile. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just helping, I was part of something now. Winter came earlier than usual that year. The first snow fell in late November, covering the yards and sidewalks in white silence. I remember standing on my porch, looking across at the Thompson house, the roof lined with frost, the chimney dark. It hit me then just how fragile everything inside that home was, and how quickly the cold could make things worse. So, I started checking on them daily. Sometimes I'd bring firewood. Sometimes I'd cook something warm and carry it over. Sometimes I'd just shovel the path before Lily woke up, so she wouldn't have to. But no matter what I did, Lily always looked at me the same way, grateful but guarded. Like part of her still believed this was temporary, that I'd eventually stop showing up just like everyone else. One night, as I was fixing the furnace in their basement, her grandmother leaned against the doorway and said softly, "You remind me of her father back when he was young." The word stuck with me. I didn't want to replace anyone, but maybe, just maybe, I was filling a space that had been left empty for too long. Green circle. December rolled in, and with it came Christmas. Our street used to light up during the holidays. Every house would be strung with lights. Kids would play in the snow until their fingers froze, and carolers would wander from door to door. But this year, only a few houses bothered. The Thompson house, of course, was dark. That didn't sit right with me. So, one afternoon, I knocked on their door carrying a box of tangled Christmas lights my mom had dug out of the attic. "We don't really," Lily began, but I cut her off gently. "You don't have to," I said, "but maybe it'll make things feel a little brighter." She hesitated. Then, with the faintest smile, she helped me hang them. For the first time in years, the Thompson house glowed at night. And when Lily's grandmother stepped outside and saw the lights twinkling against the snow, her eyes filled with tears. That night, I heard laughter from their porch for the first time. A small laugh, quiet and unsure, but real. Red circle. As the months passed, I became more than just a neighbor who helped out. I became family. Lily started saving me a seat at the dinner table whenever I brought food. Her grandmother began knitting me scarves, muttering that I never dressed warmly enough. And on nights when the silence of my own home felt too heavy, I'd find myself walking across the yard, welcomed inside like I belonged there. Still, I never forgot that underneath all the small joys, they were struggling. Bills piled up, her grandmother's health declined, and Lily, despite her resilience, was still just a kid carrying too much. One evening, as we sat by the tree, I asked her, "What do you want, Lily? I mean, if you could have anything, no limits." She thought for a long time, staring at the blinking lights. "I just wanted to feel like a home again," she whispered. The words cut deep, because I realized that, in her heart, she'd been holding on to a version of life that had slipped away years ago. Green circle. The turning point came in January. Her grandmother collapsed in the kitchen one morning, and Lily panicked. She called me before she called anyone else, her voice shaking so badly I could barely understand her. I rushed over, found her grandmother conscious but weak, and called an ambulance. The hospital kept her for 2 weeks. And during that time, Lily stayed at my mom's house, too scared to sleep alone. Those nights were hard. She barely ate, barely spoke. She sat curled up in blankets, staring at the wall. One night, I sat down beside her and said quietly, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Her lip trembled, and for the first time, she let herself cry. I held her, feeling her small shoulders shake, and all I could think was how unfair it was. How a kid who should have been worried about school dances and summer plans was instead terrified of losing the only family she had left. Red circle. Her grandmother came home eventually, frilier than before but still fighting. I helped set up rails in the house, made sure everything was safe, and told Lily we'd figure things out together. And slowly, the weight lifted. Neighbors began noticing. Some started dropping off meals. Others offered to drive her grandmother to appointments. It wasn't just me anymore, it was a community. And Lily, she bloomed. She laughed more. She teased me when I burned pancakes. She started talking about her dreams again: college, travel, writing books. Things she hadn't allowed herself to imagine before. One night, as we sat outside watching the snowfall, she turned to me and said softly, "You changed everything, you know." I shook my head. "No, Lily, you changed everything by not giving up." But the truth was, she had changed me too. Green circle. Because somewhere in the middle of all this, I realized that helping them wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was about belonging, about finding a place where my life finally made sense. And as the months stretched into years, the Thompson house wasn't quiet anymore. It wasn't broken. It was alive again. Because love, no matter where it comes from, no matter how small, can rebuild walls, light dark rooms, and carry people through winters they thought they wouldn't survive. And that's exactly what happened there. If you're still listening, take this moment to hit that like button, subscribe, and check out the other stories waiting for you. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. I was never the type of person who thought small acts of kindness could completely change the course of someone's life. To me, kindness was just basic manners. Hold a door open, say thank you, tip your waiter. Nothing earth-shattering. But the way things unfolded in my life last year made me realize just how wrong I'd been about all of that. It started on a chilly Wednesday morning in late October. The kind of morning where the sky looks heavy, like it's about to snow, but it's just a little too early in the season. I was running late for work, coffee in hand, rushing across town because traffic had been brutal. My head was filled with all the usual stresses: emails, deadlines, bills piling up on my counter. And then, right on the corner near the bus stop, I noticed a woman sitting on the cold bench, staring at the ground like the world had just fallen apart beneath her. Normally, I might have walked right past. I wasn't heartless, but I was busy, always in a rush, always convinced I didn't have the time. But that morning, something about her body language, the way her shoulders were curled forward, her hands trembling slightly, stopped me. I don't know why. Maybe it was the fact that she was wearing nothing but a thin hoodie when the air had that sharp bite to it. Maybe it was the way her eyes looked red and tired, like she hadn't slept in days. So instead of rushing past, I paused, and I asked her the simplest question anyone could. "Are you okay?" She looked up at me, startled at first, like she didn't even expect to be noticed. Then she shook her head. No words, just that small motion that carried the weight of whatever she was carrying. I don't know what possessed me, but I sat down next to her, ignoring the way the bench was cold against my work clothes. We sat in silence for almost a full minute. And then, finally, she whispered, "I don't know what I'm going to do." I wanted to ask a million questions, but I didn't push. Instead, I offered her my coffee, even though I desperately needed it to survive the day. She blinked at me like I was insane, then gave this little laugh that was half a sob. She took it, hands shaking as she wrapped them around the cup for warmth. That was the first time I talked to Emily. At the time, I didn't know her story. I didn't know she had just lost her job 2 weeks earlier, that her apartment building had been sold out from under her, or that her family had basically cut her off after years of complicated fights. All I knew was that she looked like someone who needed to be seen. I ended up being late to work that day. Honestly, I didn't even care. We sat there for nearly an hour. She told me bits and pieces, never giving me the full story, just fragments. It feels like everything's crumbling. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. I just need to figure something out. Her voice was soft, but every word carried this weight, like she was drowning and barely keeping her head above water. By the time I finally left, I gave her my number scribbled on a scrap of paper from my bag. "If you need someone to talk to, call me." "I mean it," I said. I didn't expect her to actually use it, but she did. That same night, the first call was short, just a thank you. Her voice sounded steadier, but I could still hear the cracks beneath it. And then the next day, she called again. This time we talked for nearly an hour. She told me how she'd been applying for jobs nonstop, how the rejection emails were piling up in her inbox. She confessed she'd been skipping meals just to stretch the last of her money for rent. I sat there on the other end of the line, listening to every word, trying to offer encouragement where I could. I wasn't some kind of savior. I wasn't rich. I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't even particularly wise. But I could listen, and apparently, that was enough for her. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I fell into this unexpected routine. We meet up sometimes after work, grab coffee or cheap takeout, just sit and talk. Other nights, we'd be on the phone until 1 in the morning, laughing about stupid things or venting about the day. She slowly opened up about her family, how they'd always been critical of her, how their tough love had turned into something more toxic. She talked about her dreams, the kind of career she wanted, the kind of stability she longed for, but had never really had. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of her as that woman I met at the bus stop and started thinking of her as Emily, just Emily, my friend. One night, she showed up at my door with this tiny potted plant. "You've been listening to me complain for weeks," she said, "so I thought I'd bring you something alive to balance it out." I laughed harder than I had in months. That plant is still on my kitchen windowsill today, but it wasn't all laughter. There were nights where she cried so hard I could barely understand her through the phone. Nights where I had to remind her to eat, to sleep, to keep going just one more day. It was heavy, sometimes overwhelming, but for some reason I didn't feel burdened by it. I felt honored, almost, that she trusted me enough to lean on me. Then came the night everything changed. It was just past midnight when my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen, and I answered immediately. But this time, her voice was different. Small, shaky in a way that made my stomach twist. "I don't think I can do this anymore," she whispered. I froze. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear. I asked her where she was. She hesitated, then finally gave me an address. It was a cheap motel on the edge of town. I didn't even grab a coat. I just ran out the door, keys in hand, driving faster than I ever had in my life. When I got there, I found her sitting on the floor by the bed, knees pulled to her chest, a half-empty bottle of something strong beside her. She looked up at me with tear-streaked cheeks, eyes so lost it broke me. I sat down right there on the floor, took the bottle from her hands, and said the only thing I could think of, "You're not alone. Not anymore." That night, I stayed with her until she finally fell asleep. I called in sick the next morning and the morning after that. I didn't care about work, deadlines, or anything else. All I cared about was making sure Emily made it through. It wasn't easy. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life, and I can't even imagine what they were like for her. There were ups and downs, steps forward and steps back. But slowly, little by little, things began to change. She started therapy. She found a part-time job at a bookstore. She moved into a tiny studio apartment. Every milestone, no matter how small, felt like a victory. And through it all, we stayed side by side. Somewhere along the way, what started as kindness turned into something deeper. Something neither of us had expected, but both of us had needed more than we realized. I woke up the next morning with sunlight streaming through the blinds, my head still full of everything that had happened the night before. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I sat up slowly, stretched, and stared at the ceiling for a while, letting myself settle. Last night had been a turning point, even if it didn't feel like it yet. I padded downstairs, the hardwood floors cool under my feet, and found my mom already in the kitchen. She was sipping her coffee, looking out the window like she always did in the mornings. She turned when she heard me, offering me a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sleep okay?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yeah," I said, even though my mind had raced for hours before I finally drifted off. She nodded, as though she knew I was lying, and pushed a plate with toast toward me. "Eat something. You'll need it." I sat at the counter, buttered the toast, and we ate in silence for a while. It wasn't the uncomfortable kind of silence, though. It was the kind where you both know there are things that don't need to be said yet. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Your brother texted me late last night," she said. I froze with my toast halfway to my mouth. "And," she looked at me, her eyes steady. He's still angry. But he said he gets why you said what you did. That hit harder than I expected. A mix of relief and guilt twisted inside me. So what now? I asked. Mom shrugged lightly, but there was a weight in her voice. That's for him to figure out. And for us, it means we go on with our lives. You can't fix everything for everyone. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I went out for a walk later, just to clear my head. The neighborhood was quiet, kids riding their bikes down the street, someone mowing their lawn, and the smell of fresh-cut grass filling the air. Life felt so normal compared to the chaos in my head. As I walked, I kept replaying everything. My brother's anger, the way he stormed out, and my mom's calm steadiness. I realized that for the first time, I hadn't tried to smooth things over. I hadn't tried to play the peacekeeper. I had just stood my ground, and maybe that was okay. That afternoon, I went to see my dad. He lived just a couple towns over, and though things between him and my mom had been strained for years, he and I had always kept in touch. He opened the door with his usual half grin, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Hey, kiddo," he said, pulling me into a hug. "You look like you had a week." I laughed, though it came out tired. That's one way to put it. We sat in his living room, the TV muted in the background, and I told him everything. About the family dinner, about what I said to my brother, and how everything spiraled after that. Dad listened quietly, his hands folded in his lap, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he leaned back with a sigh. You know, sometimes the hardest thing in the world is realizing you don't owe people more of yourself than you can give. Especially family. People always say family first, but the truth is family should never come at the expense of who you are. I sat with that for a long time. My dad wasn't always the most profound guy, but when he said things like that, they stuck. We ended up spending the whole afternoon together, cooking, watching some old movie neither of us really paid attention to, and just talking. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. That night, when I got home, I checked my phone and saw a message from my brother. Just a single line. "I'm still mad, but I don't hate you." I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the words, a small lump forming in my throat. Maybe it wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. And sometimes a start is enough. Over the next week, things slowly found their rhythm again. Mom and I cooked together more, filling the house with the smell of garlic and onions frying in the pan. My brother kept his distance, but every so often he'd text me something random, a meme, a sarcastic comment, nothing serious. But it was something. One night, lying in bed, I thought about how much energy I'd spent over the years worrying about whether people were mad at me, whether I was doing enough to keep the peace. And maybe for once, it was okay to let people sit with their anger. Maybe it wasn't my job to carry it for them. The world didn't fall apart because I said no. The sky didn't crash down because I put myself first. In fact, in some strange way, things felt steadier than they had in a long time. And maybe that's what growing up really is. Realizing that loving people doesn't mean sacrificing yourself every time. It means showing up honestly, even when it's messy, even when it's uncomfortable. The next morning, I woke up with a quiet sense of peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you're finally okay with where you stand. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. If you made it all the way here, you're the kind of person I want sticking around. Hit that subscribe button and join me for more stories. Trust me, the next ones will keep you hooked. There's this old saying that sometimes home isn't a place, it's a person. I never really understood that until I moved away for college and realized how much I missed the small, everyday comforts of being with the people who raised me. What I didn't know back then was how much those little moments would mean years later, when life felt heavier than I could handle. Back when I was a kid, Sundays were sacred in our house. Not in a church-going, ritualistic way, but because Sundays meant one thing: family breakfast. No matter how busy the week had been, no matter if Dad was working late shifts or Mom was running errands all week, Sunday mornings always started with everyone gathered around the kitchen table. The smell of bacon would hit me before I even opened my eyes. Sometimes it was pancakes, sometimes waffles, but bacon was always sizzling in the pan. My dad had this way of cooking it just right, crispy on the edges but not burnt. Mom would be at the counter, hair still messy from sleep, pouring orange juice into mismatched cups. My little sister usually sat cross-legged on one of the chairs, already sneaking bites of fruit before anyone else sat down. I'd stumble in, still groggy, and Dad would greet me with, "You're just in time, champ. Grab a plate." He never said good morning in a normal way, always something silly like that. It made me laugh even when I didn't feel like laughing. The table itself was small and scratched up, but when we were all sitting there, it felt like the most important place in the world. Dad always told stories while we ate, sometimes about his own childhood, sometimes about something funny that happened at work. Mom would shake her head and say, "Don't fill their heads with nonsense," but she'd be smiling the whole time. And it wasn't about the food, really. It was about that hour or two where the world slowed down. No phones, no distractions, just us. If someone had a problem, it usually came out over those breakfasts. If my sister was upset about school, Dad would tease her until she laughed. If Mom was stressed about bills, Dad would promise her it would be okay, even if he didn't know how yet. And if I had a bad week, they always reminded me that one rough patch didn't define me. As a kid, I thought it was just breakfast. As an adult, I realized it was their way of reminding us we were never alone. That no matter how chaotic life got, we had this anchor, this weekly ritual that tied us together. What's funny is, even now, when I'm living hours away, I find myself trying to recreate it. I'll cook breakfast on Sundays, even if it's just for me, and I'll call my parents while I eat. And every time, I can almost smell the bacon again, hear my dad's ridiculous stories, and feel the weight of those mornings wrapping around me like the softest blanket. When I got older, those Sunday breakfasts started to mean even more, though I didn't realize it until I left home. College was exciting at first, but it was also lonely in ways I hadn't expected. You could be surrounded by people in dorms and still feel like nobody really sees you. That first semester, I was buried in assignments, struggling to balance work and school, and trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. On Sundays, I'd find myself staring at the cafeteria food, wishing I could teleport back to that tiny scratched-up kitchen table. It wasn't about bacon or pancakes. It was about the feeling of being safe, about hearing my sister complain about math homework, about Dad's dumb jokes, about Mom fussing at him for putting too much syrup on his waffles. There was one Sunday in particular that I'll never forget. I had just gotten back a brutal exam grade, and I was sitting in my dorm room staring at the paper like it had betrayed me. My roommate was gone for the weekend, so the silence was thick. I remember lying back on the bed, feeling that heavy, sinking pit in my chest, the kind that whispers you're failing at everything. Then my phone buzzed. It was a group text from my family. A picture popped up. The kitchen table, plates full of food, my sister grinning with 2 strips of bacon hanging out of her mouth like walrus tusks. The caption from Dad said, "Breakfast isn't the same without you, champ, but we saved your seat." That broke me, not in a bad way, but in the kind of way that lets tears actually release the weight you're carrying. I must have stared at that picture for 10 minutes straight before I grabbed my phone and called them. They passed the phone around, each of them telling me little updates. My sister had finally nailed the test. Mom found a recipe she wanted to try. Dad was rambling about something with his car. None of it was life-changing, but it made me feel human again. After that, I started making my own Sunday breakfasts, even if it was just scrambled eggs and toast. I'd call home while I ate, and it became my lifeline. Sometimes my friend from school would join me, and before long, we had a little Sunday tradition of our own. It wasn't quite the same, but it was close enough to remind me that family doesn't just disappear when you move out. It stretches and grows with you. Years later, when life got really hard, during my first real breakup, during the nights I wondered if I'd chosen the wrong path, during those moments when everything felt like too much, it was that memory, that anchor of family breakfasts, that kept me steady. I closed my eyes and pictured that table, that warmth, and suddenly I wasn't alone. It's wild how those simple rituals shape us. We think it's just breakfast, just small talk, just food, but really, it's a thread we carry forever. And when the world feels too heavy, sometimes all it takes is remembering that thread is still there, unbroken, waiting for you to hold on to it again. So if you're listening to this and you've got a family tradition, hold on to it. If you don't, maybe start one, because you'll be amazed how those little moments can carry you through the storms you don't even see coming yet. And hey, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. Take a second to hit like, subscribe, and check out my other videos, because just like those Sunday breakfasts, we've built a little tradition here too, and I'd love for you to keep being a part of it. When I was little, I used to think families worked like the sitcoms on TV. Problems popped up, people argued, and then everyone hugged it out by the end of the episode. But the older I got, the more I realized life doesn't tie itself into neat 30-minute packages. Sometimes hurt lingers. Sometimes love isn't enough to patch everything. And sometimes you find yourself standing in a kitchen at 30 years old, staring across the counter at your younger brother, wondering if you even know him anymore. That was the reality for me and my brother, Daniel. Growing up, he was my shadow. We're 3 years apart, me being the older one, and in our small suburban neighborhood, we did everything together. Bikes down the cracked sidewalks, little league games, catching fireflies in jars during summer nights. If you had asked me when I was 10, I'd have sworn Daniel was my best friend forever. But then life did what it always does. High school came, and suddenly, the 3-year gap felt like a canyon. I was off learning to drive, worrying about SAT scores, and sneaking out to bonfires, while Daniel was still a freshman trying to figure out his locker combination. By the time I left for college, we had grown into different worlds. I thought we'd reconnect eventually. Instead, we drifted further. Part of that was me. I'll admit it. I didn't come home much those years. I got swept up in campus life, internships, and then work in the city. But Daniel found his own crowd. And to be blunt, they weren't the best influences. When I visited home one Thanksgiving, I found out he'd been skipping classes, getting into fights, and by senior year, he'd barely graduated. Still, I held on to hope. He was my brother. He'd figure it out. Only he didn't. Fast forward a decade, and Daniel was still struggling. He bounced between jobs, spent money recklessly, and seemed allergic to responsibility. Meanwhile, I'd built what looked like a stable life. Steady career in marketing, a fiancé, and a small but cozy apartment. But every time family gathered, I felt the unspoken comparison. Me, the responsible one, and Daniel, the problem. And that comparison fueled a quiet resentment between us. One that neither of us voiced, but both of us carried. Things finally boiled over last year, when our mom's health took a turn. She's always been the glue of our family. The kind of woman who'd wake up at 5 a.m. to make pancakes for us before school. But after she was diagnosed with a heart condition, she couldn't keep doing everything herself. Suddenly, the responsibility of supporting her landed squarely on me. I tried to juggle it. Doctor appointments, bills, keeping her spirits up. It was exhausting, but she's my mom. I'd do anything for her. What broke me wasn't the responsibility, but Daniel. He barely showed up. Sure, he'd swing by sometimes, crack a few jokes, bring her flowers. But when it came to the unglamorous stuff, the appointments, the insurance calls, the hours spent sitting in waiting rooms, he was nowhere to be found. And when I confronted him about it one night, his response was like gasoline on fire. "You're better at that stuff than me," he shrugged, as if our mother's life was some group project he could skate through while I carried the grade. I exploded. Years of frustration poured out. I called him selfish, irresponsible, even said Mom deserved a better son. His face went blank, and for a second, I thought he might actually punch me. But instead, he just muttered, "Screw you, man," and walked out. That was 6 months ago. We hadn't spoken since. Which brings me to the kitchen. It was Mom's birthday, and despite everything, I showed up at her house with a cake. Daniel was already there, leaning against the counter like nothing had happened. When our eyes met, the silence was heavy, thick with all the words we hadn't said. "Hey," Mom said, her voice bright but strained, like she could sense the tension. "Both my boys in the same room. That's a present in itself." I forced a smile. "Happy birthday, Mom." Daniel muttered, "Yeah, happy birthday," and then avoided my eyes. The party itself was small, just us, a couple of relatives, and some neighbors. But the entire time, I felt the weight of Daniel's presence. Every laugh he made, every story he told, it all grated on me. Not because I hated him, but because I wanted to stop hating him. I wanted my brother back. After everyone left and Mom had gone to rest, it was just the two of us cleaning up. We worked in silence, clinking plates into the sink. Then, out of nowhere, Daniel said, "She's not doing great, huh?" The question caught me off guard. I glanced at him, and for the first time in a long time, he looked worried. Not detached, not defensive. Just a little brother scared of losing his mom. "No," I admitted, "she's not." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. And then, softer, "I don't know how to help." Those words, simple as they were, cracked something in me. For years, I had painted Daniel as the villain in my head, the irresponsible brother, the one who didn't care. But maybe he wasn't careless. Maybe he was just lost. I wanted to believe that. So I told him, "You don't have to be perfect, Dan. You just have to show up. That's all she wants. That's all I want." He looked at me then, really looked at me. His eyes were tired like mine. And for the first time in forever, I saw my brother again. The kid who used to pedal beside me on a rusted bike, who used to trade half his Halloween candy for my favorite chocolate bars. He was still in there. "I'll try," he said quietly, and maybe for the first time in years, I believed him. That night, as I drove home, I thought about how fragile family really is. You think blood is enough, but it's not. Relationships need care, forgiveness, effort. And maybe, just maybe, we were finally ready to start giving that to each other again. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Happy endings aren't guaranteed. Sometimes they're built one shaky, uncertain step at a time. And I had no idea if Daniel was truly ready to take those steps, or if this was just another fleeting promise. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Daniel's words in my head. "I'll try." Those two words echoed louder than they should have. For years, all I'd gotten from him was excuses, sarcasm, or silence. But now a promise, small, hesitant, but still a promise. The question was, could I trust it? The next morning, I got my answer. I had taken Mom to her cardiologist appointment. Normally, it was just me sitting in that chilly office, pretending to understand the charts and terms the doctor rattled off. But when I walked into the waiting room, there was Daniel. He was slouched in one of the plastic chairs, scrolling his phone, a half-empty coffee in his hand. He looked up when I came in and gave me this awkward nod, like we were two coworkers meeting in the break room. "Hey," he said. "Hey." It was simple, but it meant everything. He was there. During the appointment, he didn't say much. Mostly he sat beside Mom, occasionally asking the doctor to repeat something. But I noticed he was paying attention, really paying attention. And when the doctor mentioned a new medication, Daniel surprised me by jotting the name down on a scrap of paper. Afterward, as we walked Mom back to the car, she slipped her arm through his. I can't explain the relief I felt seeing that. It was like she had been waiting for this. Her youngest son showing up, being present. And for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I wasn't carrying this burden alone. But hope is tricky. It gives you just enough light to see ahead, then dares you not to stumble. A few weeks passed, and at first, Daniel kept showing up. He took Mom to her physical therapy once, brought groceries another time, even fixed the leaky faucet in her bathroom. Every time, I felt this cautious gratitude, like maybe I was witnessing a transformation. Then came a phone call. It was a Thursday night, and I was knee-deep in work emails when Mom called, her voice small. "Your brother didn't come today." I frowned. "Come for what?" "He promised he'd take me to the pharmacy," she said. But I guess he forgot. Forgot. That word set me off. I called Daniel immediately, and when he picked up, his voice was thick with background noise. Music, laughter, clinking glasses. "Dan, where the hell are you?" I demanded. "At a bar," he said casually. "Why?" "Mom was waiting for you. She needed her meds." There was a pause. "Oh crap. I totally spaced. Can you grab them?" "Unbelievable," I snapped. "You said you'd try, remember? This is trying." "Relax," he shot back. "It's just one time. One time too many." We argued until I hung up, shaking with anger. That night, as I dropped off Mom's medication, I saw the disappointment in her eyes. She didn't scold Daniel. She never could, but the hurt was there. And once again, I felt that old resentment creep back. But then something shifted. A week later, Daniel showed up at my apartment. He didn't call first, didn't text. Just knocked on the door at 9 p.m. When I opened it, he looked wrecked. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and he had this heaviness about him I hadn't seen before. "Can I come in?" he asked. I let him in, and we sat in silence for a few minutes before he finally spoke. "I screwed up," he muttered. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "I thought I could just flip a switch, you know? Be the brother, the son everyone wants me to be. But I don't know how. I get scared. I don't want to mess up, so I avoid it. And then I mess up worse." There was something raw in his confession, something honest. And for once, I didn't feel like yelling. "Dan," I said, "you don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep showing up, even when you screw up. Especially when you screw up." He rubbed his face, sighing. "I don't want Mom to think I don't care." "Then prove it," I said simply. That night, Daniel crashed on my couch. It felt weird, like we were teenagers again. And in a way, it reminded me that beneath all the fights and resentment, he was still my brother. Over the next few months, things slowly started to change. Daniel wasn't perfect. He missed things sometimes, made dumb choices, slipped back into old habits. But he also tried harder than I'd ever seen him try before. He took Mom on walks, drove her to appointments, even started cooking dinner for her once a week. And little by little, I stopped feeling like I was carrying everything alone. But the real turning point came on a cold December night. Mom had a scare, chest pains that sent us rushing to the ER. I'll never forget sitting in that sterile waiting room, heart pounding, praying she'd be okay. Daniel was there too, pacing like a caged animal, hands shaking. When the doctor finally came out and said she'd be all right, that it was just a complication, not a heart attack, Daniel broke down. Right there, in the middle of the waiting room, he sank into a chair and cried. I'd never seen him cry before, not once. And in that moment, I realized something. Daniel wasn't heartless, careless, or selfish. He was just scared. Scared of failing, scared of losing Mom, scared of not being enough. Maybe we all were. That night, as we drove home, he turned to me and said, "Thanks for not giving up on me." I swallowed hard. "Thanks for not giving up on yourself." It wasn't some dramatic resolution. We didn't hug it out like a movie ending, but it was real, and that felt like enough. Over time, our relationship rebuilt itself. Slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. We fought less, laughed more, and started finding common ground again. And Mom, she lit up every time she saw us together, her boys finally united. Looking back, I think what saved us wasn't some grand gesture or perfect apology. It was the little things. The showing up, even when it was messy. The trying, even after failing. The love, even when it hurt. Families don't always work like TV shows. They're messy, complicated, and full of scars. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: love doesn't need to be perfect to be real. It just needs to keep trying. And maybe that's enough. If you felt something while listening, take a moment to like this video, hit subscribe, and check out more stories like this. You'll always find something here that speaks to you. I never thought my life would end up like this, sitting in my car outside of my mom's house, palms sweaty against the steering wheel, debating if I should walk in or just drive away. The fall air was crisp, the kind that smells faintly of wood smoke and makes you feel like maybe things can start fresh, but my chest was tight. I hadn't been back home in over a year, not since the fight that had split everything wide open. My mom had called me 2 days ago, her voice softer than usual. She said, "Honey, your sister is coming back for the weekend. Maybe it's time you come too. We're not getting younger, and we miss you." The thing about my mom is she always knows how to twist a knife and soften it at the same time. Because yes, she missed me, but what she really meant was that my sister missed me, or maybe that my sister needed me. And that was a whole different story. See, my sister Emily and I used to be inseparable growing up. 2 years apart, we did everything together. Camping trips, late-night cereal raids, cry on each other's shoulders over dumb breakups in high school. She was my best friend, even when she drove me crazy. But last year, everything fell apart after my own breakup, a brutal one. I've been dating Matt for 3 years. He wasn't perfect, but I thought we had something real. He fit into our family like he'd always belonged. My mom loved him, my dad cracked beers with him on Sundays, and Emily would hang out with us like he was already part of the siblings. Then one night, out of nowhere, I found out Matt had been cheating on me. Not just a one-time mistake. A full-blown, months-long affair. Who was the other woman? Yeah, that's the part that gutted me. It was Emily's best friend, someone I'd let into my apartment, someone who came to family dinners with us. And Emily knew. She didn't approve, but she knew for weeks before telling me. She swore she didn't want to ruin things unless she was sure, but by the time she told me, I'd already been humiliated. The fight that followed was ugly. I yelled at Emily for choosing loyalty to her friend over me. She yelled back that I always expected her to take my side no matter what, even if it meant ruining someone else's life. We said things we couldn't take back, and then I packed a bag and left, cutting myself off from all of them. Now here I was a year later, staring at the familiar brick house with the porch light on, probably left for me. My chest was screaming, "Don't go," but my heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, it was time to let the wound breathe. I finally got out, slamming the car door louder than I meant to. The sound made me flinch. Walking up the driveway, I noticed how much it stayed the same. My dad's old truck still sat half-parked on the lawn. The flower bed Mom swore she'd fix was still overrun. Normalcy was so loud it almost hurt. The door opened before I could knock. It was Emily. Her hair was longer, darker, pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes went wide when she saw me. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there like she was frozen in time. Finally, she whispered, "You came." I shrugged, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked. "Mom called. Said you'd be here." She nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The warmth of the house hit me instantly. The smell of pot roast, the faint crackle of the fireplace, the sound of Dad's laugh in the living room. I hadn't realized how much I missed it until that moment. We walked into the kitchen, where Mom was pulling rolls out of the oven. She dropped the tray when she saw me, rushing over and hugging me so tightly I almost couldn't breathe. "Baby," she kept saying over and over, her hands shaking against my back. Dad appeared in the doorway, his eyes glassy. He just nodded, his way of saying everything he couldn't put into words. Dinner was awkward. Everyone tried to act normal, but the tension was like a live wire running across the table. Emily and I sat opposite each other, barely making eye contact. Mom filled every silence with small talk about the neighbors, about work, about the dog. Dad grunted a few responses. But underneath it all was the unsaid, the blowout that had ripped the family apart, the silence that followed. Halfway through the meal, Emily finally cleared her throat. I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, her eyes flicking to me and away. My fork froze midair. "Now," she nodded. "If you're willing." Mom started to protest, but Dad shot her a look, and she quieted. The air thickened. So Emily and I stood up, moving to the back porch. The night air was cool, filled with the hum of crickets. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She leaned against the railing, arms crossed, like she was holding herself together. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry." The words hit me like a punch. I'd waited a year to hear them, but instead of relief, I felt a storm rising. "You're sorry?" I snapped. "You knew Matt was cheating on me, Em. You knew, and you said nothing. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me? Everyone else knew before I did. Everyone. And you let me sit there, cooking dinners, making plans for a future with him, while he was screwing around with your best friend. Her face crumpled, but she didn't look away. I didn't want to believe it, okay? I kept hoping it wasn't true, that maybe I misread things. And when I knew for sure, I froze. I thought if I told you, it would destroy you. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me? My laugh was bitter. You didn't protect me, you betrayed me. You chose her over me. Emily shook her head hard. No, I didn't choose her. I swear to God, I didn't. She's not even in my life anymore. I cut her off. But you're my sister. And I was scared that if I told you the truth too soon, I'd lose you anyway. Well, congratulations, I said, my voice sharp as glass. You lost me anyway. The silence that followed was heavy. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She just looked at me, like maybe if she stared long enough, I'd see the truth in her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But mostly, I wanted to stop feeling like the ground beneath me was always shifting. That night stretched on like it would never end. Emily and I stood there on the porch in silence, the chill of the evening pressing against us. The crickets filled the space between our words, their steady hum a reminder that time was still moving, even if we weren't. Finally, Emily said softly, "Do you remember when we were kids, and you broke your arm falling out of the tree in the backyard? You cried the whole way to the ER, but you wouldn't let Mom hold your hand. You only wanted me. You said, if Em's here, I'll be okay." The memory came rushing back. The smell of antiseptic, the sting of the cast being set, and Emily sitting beside me, holding my hand so tightly it felt like she could anchor me through the pain. My throat tightened, but I said nothing. I made a lot of mistakes, she continued, but I never stopped wanting to be the person you leaned on. I messed up. I froze when I should have fought for you, and I hate myself for that. I turned away, staring at the trees swaying in the yard. Do you know what it felt like, Em? To realize the people closest to me knew the truth, and I didn't? I felt like the biggest fool alive. Like maybe I wasn't worth honesty. Like maybe everyone thought I was too weak to handle it. Emily shook her head. You're not weak. God, you've never been weak. I was the weak one. I was scared of losing you, and I ended up causing exactly that. Her words sat heavy in the night air. I wanted to cling to my anger. It was safer. It kept me from drowning in the hurt. But under the anger was something worse, grief. Grief for the year I'd lost with my family, for the sister I'd shut out, for the love I'd given to Matt that he didn't deserve. I sank onto the porch step, my hands covering my face. Do you know what I went through after? My voice cracked. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough. And the one person I thought would always be in my corner, you weren't there. Emily sat beside me slowly, leaving a cautious space between us. I know. I replay it in my head every day. If I could go back, I'd tell you the second I knew. I'd scream if I had to. I'd rather you hate me for saying it too soon than hate me for not saying it at all. For the first time that night, her voice broke and a tear slipped down her cheek. I'd seen Emily cry maybe 5 times in my life. Seeing it now cracked something in me. I let out a shaky breath. You should have trusted me to handle it. I should have, she whispered. We sat there in silence, our breaths fogging in the cool air. Slowly, almost cautiously, Emily reached over and put her hand near mine, not touching, just waiting. It was like she was silently asking, can I come back into your life? I didn't grab her hand, not yet, but I didn't move away either. After a long while, I said, I don't know if I can just forgive and forget. I don't expect you to, Emily said quickly. I want to earn back whatever trust one can, however long it takes. I'll be here, always. Her words settled deep inside me. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight alone. When we finally went back inside, Mom's eyes flicked between us anxiously. She must have seen something in our faces, though, because her shoulders sagged with relief. Dad gave a single nod, the closest thing to a family peace treaty. The rest of the night was quieter. We watched TV together, not saying much, just existing in the same space without it feeling like a war zone. It wasn't fixed. Nothing was magically healed, but it was a start. Later, lying in the guest room bed, I stared at the ceiling. I thought about Matt, about how much of myself I'd given to someone who never deserved it. But I also thought about Emily, about how easy it would have been for her to let the silence go on forever. Instead, she tried. She showed up, and maybe, just maybe, that meant I could too. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. Emily was at the stove, flipping them like nothing had happened. She glanced up, a nervous smile tugging at her lips. "Coffee's ready," she said softly. I poured myself a mug and sat at the table. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like running. If you're still listening, thank you. These stories mean a lot to share. And if you want to hear more family, breakup, and emotional stories like this, make sure you stick around, hit that subscribe, and check out the other stories waiting for you. It helps more than you know, and I promise, there's plenty more coming. The night it all blew up, it wasn't because of one big fight. It was the tiny sparks that had been building for months, sparks everyone pretended weren't dangerous until they finally caught fire. We were at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, something that had always been a tradition, but lately it felt more like an obligation. My dad at the head of the table, Mom serving food with that smile she wore like armor, and my sister, Rachel, sitting across from me, arms crossed, face sharp. The tension wasn't new. Rachel and I had been circling each other for months, like two boxers waiting for the bell to ring. Ever since my breakup with Sarah, my long-term girlfriend, things hadn't been the same. Rachel had been friends with Sarah first, and when Sarah and I split, Rachel made it clear where her loyalty landed. "You could have handled it better," Rachel muttered that night, spearing a piece of chicken with her fork. "The way you ended things. You blindsided her." I set my fork down slowly. "Rachel, we've been over this. Sarah and I weren't working. I wasn't going to drag it out just because it made you more comfortable. You didn't even try to fix it," she shot back. 7 years, and you just walked away." My mom gave Rachel a warning look. "Not at the dinner table, please." But Rachel never had much use for rules, especially when she felt righteous. She leaned forward, eyes locked on me. "You think you're the only one who lost something? Sarah was like family to me. You didn't just break up with her, you ripped her out of all of our lives." The words hit like a punch I wasn't ready for. My chest tightened. "So what? I should have stayed in a miserable relationship just to keep you happy." Rachel's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "You don't get it. You never do. You're so selfish, Jake. Everything's about you." The room went dead silent. My dad stared at his plate. Mom froze mid-reach with the mashed potatoes. Nobody moved. I stood too, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You want to call me selfish? Fine. But you're the one who's been treating me like a villain for months. I'm sorry Sarah was important to you, but that doesn't mean I had to spend the rest of my life pretending I was happy." Rachel's lip trembled for just a second, and for the briefest moment, I saw the little sister who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who believed I could protect her from anything. Then her face hardened. "You don't deserve her. You never did." She stormed out of the dining room, her footsteps loud against the old wooden floor. The front door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled. The silence she left behind was worse than the fight. My mom looked at me with eyes full of worry, my dad still refusing to lift his gaze. Finally, Mom said, "She's hurting too, you know." I shook my head, sinking back into my chair. "Yeah, but she doesn't care that I'm hurting." That night, I couldn't sleep. Rachel's words kept echoing in my head. "You don't deserve her. You never did." It was the kind of sentence that slices deeper the longer you think about it. The thing was, part of me wondered if she was right. Sarah had been patient, kind, the type of person who always remembered birthdays and sent little good morning texts. I'd been the one pulling away, retreating into myself when the cracks started showing. Work stress, family stress, my own insecurities. I let them pile up until there was nothing left between us but distance. But I also knew staying would have been a lie. And wasn't honesty better, even if it left wreckage behind? The next morning, Rachel showed up at my apartment. No warning, no text. Just a knock at the door. I opened it, expecting another round of fire, but she looked wrecked. Her eyes were swollen, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and she held a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. "I found this," she said, shoving it toward me. It was a letter. Sarah's handwriting. My stomach flipped as I unfolded it. "Jake," it began, "I know we're done, but I need you to know I never stopped loving you. I just couldn't keep being the only one trying. I hope one day you find what you're looking for. Take care of yourself." By the time I finished reading, my throat was tight. Rachel crossed her arms, watching me. "She wrote it the day after you ended it. She gave it to me. Said I'd know when to give it to you." I stared at her. "Why now?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm tired of being angry. And I think maybe you need to see that she didn't hate you. She was hurt, but she didn't hate you." The walls I'd built started to crack. For the first time in months, Rachel's anger wasn't aimed like a weapon. It was raw, vulnerable. "Ratch," my voice broke. "I didn't mean to take her from you two." She shook her head. "I know. I miss her. And I miss you. I hate that it feels like I lost both of you." I folded the letter carefully, my hands trembling. "Maybe we don't have to keep losing each other." Rachel sniffled, then gave a shaky laugh. "You sound like Dad when he's trying to fix the Wi-Fi." We both laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe we could find our way back. But as I looked down at the letter again, one thought refused to leave my mind. Maybe Sarah was still out there, still carrying the same ache I felt. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. I kept Sarah's letter on my nightstand for weeks. Every night before bed, I would read it again, trying to figure out if there was some hidden meaning I'd missed the first dozen times. Every curve of her handwriting felt like it carried a different weight, a different shade of feeling. The more I read it, the more I realized how much I had shut down toward the end of our relationship. It wasn't just about the fights we didn't have or the conversations we avoided. It was about me refusing to let her in when things got hard. She kept trying, kept knocking on a locked door, and I'd stayed silent behind it. That truth hit me harder than Rachel's words ever could. Rachel had started coming around more often after she gave me the letter. At first, it was awkward. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, the TV flickering while neither of us really watched. But little by little, we started talking again. Not about Sarah, not at first. Just about work, about Mom's endless gardening projects, about Dad's obsession with his fantasy football league. One night, she came over with takeout and plopped down on the couch. "So, have you thought about reaching out to her?" I froze with a chopstick halfway to my mouth. "Sarah?" "Yeah," Rachel said, eyes glued to the carton of lo mein like it held the secrets of the universe. "Don't look at me like that. I'm not saying you two should get back together. But maybe, I don't know, closure? Something. You can't just keep staring at that letter forever." I set my food down and leaned back. I don't know if that's a good idea. What if she's moved on? Rachel finally looked at me, her expression softer than I'd seen in months. And what if she hasn't? You'll never know unless you ask. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept replaying Rachel's words, weighing the risk of reopening old wounds against the possibility of healing. Eventually, I picked up my phone and drafted a message. "Hey, Sarah, I know it's been a while, but I'd really like to talk if you're open to it." I must have stared at it for 30 minutes, my thumb hovering over the send button. Finally, I took a deep breath and pressed it. Then I lay there in the dark, heart hammering, waiting for a response that didn't come. The next morning, I checked my phone before I even got out of bed. Nothing. The silence stretched into hours, then into a full day. I started regretting sending it at all. But late that night, just as I was about to give up, my phone buzzed. Ijeka. I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. I stared at her words, my pulse racing. Then another message came through. "I think we should meet. Just to talk. Nothing more." I read it twice before the meaning really sank in. She wanted to see me. When I told Rachel, she nearly dropped her coffee. "Wait, seriously?" She actually said yes. "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "We're meeting tomorrow, at the cafe near her place." Rachel leaned forward, eyes wide. "Okay, listen. Don't screw this up. Don't go in there trying to fix everything. Just listen. Be honest, but don't make promises you can't keep. It was strange being coached by my little sister about relationships, but she wasn't wrong. The next day, I showed up at the cafe 15 minutes early. My hands wouldn't stop sweating, and I must have checked my reflection in my phone camera 10 times before Sarah walked in. She looked almost the same, but different too. Her hair was a little shorter, her style a little more mature. But her eyes, those steady, thoughtful eyes, were exactly the same. "Hi," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. "Hey." My voice came out rough, like I hadn't used it in days. For a while, neither of us spoke. The noise of the cafe filled the silence. Cups clinking, baristas calling out orders, the low hum of conversations around us. Finally, Sarah broke it. "So why now?" I swallowed hard, because I never stopped thinking about you, and because I finally realized how much I shut you out. I didn't see it then, but I do now, and I'm sorry. Her expression flickered, caught between hurt and something softer. "You hurt me, Jake. You made me feel like I was alone in everything. Do you know how exhausting it is to love someone who won't let you in?" I nodded, shame flooding my chest. "Yeah, I know now. I hate that I let it get to that point." Sarah looked down at her coffee cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "I wrote you that letter because I needed you to know I didn't hate you. But I didn't give it to you because I wasn't ready to hear from you again. I guess part of me didn't believe you'd ever care enough to reach out." Hearing that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I cared. I always cared. I just didn't know how to show it without feeling like I was failing. Her eyes met mine again, sharp but sad. "So what now? You think we could just go back to how things were?" "No," I said quickly. "I don't expect that. Honestly, I don't know what happens next. I just know I don't want the last thing between us to be silence." She studied me for a long time, then sighed. "Maybe we can start by just being honest. No pretending, no avoiding. Just the truth, even if it hurts." It wasn't a promise of getting back together. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a door opening, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. When I told Rachel about it later, she smiled in that rare, genuine way that made her look like her younger self again. "See? That's all I wanted. For both of you to stop living in the past like it was a graveyard." I hugged her, something I hadn't done in forever. "Thanks for pushing me, even if you were a pain in the ass about it." Rachel laughed into my shoulder. "That's what sisters are for." And for the first time in a long time, our family felt like it wasn't breaking apart, but maybe, just maybe, finding its way back together. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from pretending nothing happened. It comes from finally facing the hurt together. If you stayed all the way through this story, you're the kind of person I'd love to keep around. So hit that like button, subscribe, and stick with me for the next one. It only gets better from here. So here's the thing. I never thought I'd be the one to bring my entire family to the breaking point. But if you ask my mom right now, she'd probably tell you I'm the reason we don't speak anymore. And the worst part? Deep down, I don't even know if she's wrong. It all started when my dad passed away 2 years ago. It wasn't sudden, but it was devastating. Cancer doesn't come quietly, and by the time it was over, there wasn't much left of him but a shell. Watching that happen, it changes you. It makes you realize how fragile people are, and how quickly everything you thought was stable can fall apart. After the funeral, the responsibility of holding the family together fell on me. Not officially, no one said it out loud, but I was the oldest, the one who lived closest, the one who was always responsible. My brother, Tyler, was off chasing his music career on the West Coast, and my sister, Emily, had just had a baby, so she was drowning in diapers and exhaustion. So was me. Always me. At first, I didn't mind. I drove Mom to her doctor's appointments. I helped her sort through Dad's things. I checked in every other day just to make sure she wasn't drowning in grief. But grief is a tidal wave, and no matter how much you try to help, it drags everyone down eventually. Mom became sharper, more critical. Nothing I did was enough. If I cleaned her kitchen, I missed the important spots. If I took her out for dinner, it wasn't the right restaurant. If I showed up tired from work, she'd snap. "Don't look at me like I'm a burden." and maybe I would have kept taking it. Maybe I would have just let her carve into me until there was nothing left, if it weren't for Tyler coming back into the picture. Tyler breezed in like he hadn't been gone for years. He showed up with his guitar, his long hair, and that same smug grin he'd always had when we were kids. Mom lit up when she saw him, like the past 2 years hadn't even happened. Suddenly, she was cooking his favorite meals, laughing at his dumb jokes, hanging on his every word. And I got shoved to the background. At first, I told myself it was fine. Of course she missed him. Of course she wanted her son around after losing Dad. But the more I watched it, the more it ate at me. Because Tyler wasn't really helping. He wasn't paying the bills, he wasn't driving her anywhere, he wasn't dealing with the endless appointments and phone calls and paperwork. He was just there, strumming his guitar on the porch, making her smile while I did the hard work. One night, after Mom had gone to bed, I finally snapped at him. "You know," I said, standing in the kitchen doorway while he raided the fridge, "it must be nice to swoop in here after years of doing nothing and act like the golden child." Tyler looked up, a slice of leftover pizza hanging out of his mouth. He grinned, chewing slowly. "Jealous much?" "I'm serious," I shot back. "I've been holding everything together since Dad died. You don't get to just show up and pretend you're the hero." He swallowed and shrugged. "I never asked you to do all that. That's your choice." My blood boiled. It wasn't a choice, Tyler. Someone had to step up. Someone had to be here while you were off playing bars and couch surfing. You don't get to dismiss that. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Maybe Mom doesn't need all your responsibility. Maybe she just needs someone to make her happy again. Ever think about that? That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Because deep down, I knew he was right in some twisted way. Mom didn't want me organizing her bills or keeping her on a strict schedule. She wanted Dad back. She wanted joy, not structure. And Tyler, useless, unreliable Tyler, somehow gave her that. But that didn't make it fair. The tension between us simmered for weeks. Every family dinner turned into a silent battle. Every conversation a tug of war. Emily noticed, of course. She'd show up with her baby on her hip, her husband trailing behind with a diaper bag. And she'd give me that look, the one that said, "Please don't start something tonight." But the breaking point came during Mom's birthday. We planned a small dinner at her house. I brought her a cake from her favorite bakery. Emily brought flowers, and Tyler brought a song. He sat in the living room with his guitar and sang this raw, emotional ballad he'd written for her about holding on through the darkness. Mom cried. She hugged him so tight, I thought she'd never let go. And then she said, in front of all of us, "You're the only one who really understands me, Tyler." I swear I felt something crack inside me when she said it. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. The cake in front of me suddenly tasteless. Emily glanced at me nervously, sensing the storm brewing. And then Tyler smirked at me over Mom's shoulder. That smug little look, like he knew he'd won. I lost it. "You got to be kidding me," I snapped, slamming my fork down. "The only one who understands you? Really? Who's been here every single day for the last 2 years, Mom? Who's been paying your bills, driving you to appointments, dealing with all the crap you don't want to deal with?" "Me." "Not him." "Me." The room went silent. Mom pulled back from Tyler, her expression hardening. "Jake." "No." I cut her off, my voice shaking with anger. "I'm not going to sit here and watch you rewrite history because he sang you a damn song. I've been breaking my back for you, and all you can do is act like I don't exist." Tyler raised his hands in mock defense. "Hey man, don't take it out on me. I didn't ask for a competition." "Shut up, Tyler," I snapped. Emily tried to intervene, her voice soft but urgent. "Guys, please. This isn't the time." But it was too late. Mom's face was cold, her eyes like steel. "If you're going to talk to me like this in my own house, maybe you shouldn't come around anymore." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You still the here, stunned. Are you serious? After everything I've done for you?" She didn't answer. She just turned away, her arms still wrapped around Tyler like he was the only child she had left. I walked out that night, and I haven't been back since. But here's the thing. Now Emily keeps calling me, saying Mom's health is slipping again. She says Tyler's too unreliable to handle it, and she can't do it alone with the baby. She wants me to come back, to pick up the pieces again. And I don't know if I can, because part of me feels like the asshole for walking away when my mom needs me. But another part of me feels like I've already given everything, and if she couldn't see that, why should I give more? The thing about guilt is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps in, it eats at you while you're trying to fall asleep. It whispers to you when you're at work, when you're driving home, when you're standing in the shower staring at the wall. After that night, after I walked out of my mom's house and left her wrapped up in Tyler's arms, I told myself I was done, that I had carried enough weight for everyone, that I wasn't going to let her keep cutting me open just to bleed for her. I told myself I was free, but then Emily called. She always started the same way, "Hey, don't hang up, okay?" And every time I sighed, pinched the bridge of my nose, and said, "I'm not going to hang up, Em. Just say it." Her voice was softer these days. Exhausted. Mom's not doing great. She's been skipping her meds again, and Tyler, well, Tyler's Tyler. He disappears for days, and then shows up with a new song or a new girlfriend. I can't do this alone. Then don't, I muttered. Tell Mom she has to figure it out herself. She made her choice. Emily let out a sharp breath. She's still our mom, Jake. I know she hurt you. I know she said things she shouldn't have, but she's grieving. We all are. You think you're the only one who had to step up? I've been raising a baby without Dad here to give me advice, without Mom to help, while trying to keep this family from shattering completely. You don't think that breaks me too? Her words stung because they were true. I wasn't the only one hurting. I was just the loudest about it. Still, I stayed away. For weeks. Until one day, Emily sent me a picture. It was Mom, sitting on the couch, her hair thinner than I remembered, her eyes distant. She looked smaller, fragile in a way that made my chest ache. The message beneath the photo was simple. She asked for you. That's when the wall I'd built started to crack. I went back the next weekend. I told myself I was just checking in, just seeing how bad things were. But the second I walked into that house, the smell of it, the faint lavender from Mom's old candles mixed with the lingering scent of Tyler's cologne, hit me like a wave. Memories I tried to bury clawed their way back up. Mom was in the living room, curled under a blanket. She looked up when she saw me, and for a second, her face lit up. But then the light flickered out, replaced by something unreadable. "You came," she whispered. I stood there awkwardly, hands shoved in my pockets. "Yeah, Emily said you weren't doing well." She nodded, eyes drifting toward the floor. "I'm Monica." Tyler wasn't there, for once, and somehow that made it harder. We sat in silence for a while, the air thick between us. Finally, she spoke. "I know I hurt you." The words startled me. Mom wasn't the type to apologize. Not ever. "I didn't mean it," she continued, her voice shaking. That night, when I said Tyler was the only one who understood me, I was just caught up in the moment. He reminded me of your father. For a second, I felt like I had him back. I didn't think about how it would sound to you. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. It wasn't just that night, Mom. It's been years of this. Of me killing myself to make sure you're okay, and you acting like it doesn't matter. Like I don't matter. Tears welled in her eyes. You do matter. More than you know. But sometimes when I look at you, I see your father. The way you walk. The way you take responsibility. The way you put everyone else before yourself. And it hurts. It hurts so much I can't breathe. With Tyler, it's different. He's nothing like your father. He's easy. He makes me laugh without making me think of what I lost. And suddenly I understood. Not fully, not completely, but enough. It wasn't that she loved Tyler more. It was that being around me reminded her of the pain she couldn't handle. That didn't make it fair, but it made it real. I stayed that night. I cooked her dinner. We watched an old movie Dad used to love, and for the first time in a long time, we talked without fighting. But of course, Tyler came back the next day. He strolled in like he owned the place, guitar slung over his back, some girl trailing behind him. He froze when he saw me sitting on the couch with Mom, and his smile slipped just a little. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," he said, dropping his guitar case with a thud. I clenched my jaw. Nice to see you too. Mom jumped up quickly, smoothing things over like she always did. Tyler, this is your brother's business, not yours. Don't start. But he couldn't help himself. He never could. You think you could just walk back in here after months of ghosting her and act like the hero again? He snapped. Better than disappearing for days and pretending a song makes up for it. I shot back. And just like that, the storm was back. Mom begged us to stop. Emily called me later begging me not to give up again. And I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there would ever be a day when this family wasn't tearing itself apart. I don't know if I did the right thing walking away before. I don't know if coming back now is just setting myself up to be hurt again. But here's what I do know. Families are messy. They're broken and unfair and exhausting. And sometimes, loving them feels like it costs more than it gives. But when I looked at my mom that night, frail and small under her blanket, I realized something I wish I had understood sooner. She didn't need me to be perfect. She just needed me to stay. And maybe that's enough. So if you're still here listening, and you've ever felt torn between walking away or holding on, I get it. Families aren't easy. But if this story hit you in any way, then you're the kind of person I want around. Stick with me, because there are so many more stories like this one, and I promise the next one will hit just as hard. The night it all blew up started with a casserole. Yeah, I know how ridiculous that sounds, but food has a funny way of dragging old wounds to the surface. My mom had invited us all over for Sunday dinner. She wanted the family together, like old times. The problem was, old times weren't all that great. Old times were full of slammed doors, whispered arguments, and silent car rides home. Old times meant my dad avoiding eye contact while my mom tried to pretend everything was fine. Still, I went. I went because Emily, my younger sister, begged me. Please, Jake, for me, just come. Maybe it'll be different this time. So there I was, sitting at the dining table that still had scratches from when Tyler, my brother, carved his initials into it as a kid. Mom had pulled out her old recipes, including the infamous green bean casserole. That dish had history. It was Dad's favorite, and Mom always made it for him. After he left, she stopped making it altogether. Until tonight. We all noticed. No one said a word, but the tension was thick. Then Tyler, never one to keep his mouth shut, stabbed his fork into the casserole and said, "Guess we're pretending like Dad never destroyed this family, huh?" Mom's face went pale. Emily shot him a glare. I just sat there, jaw tight, waiting for the explosion. It came. "Don't start, Tyler," Mom snapped. This dinner was supposed to be nice. "Nice," he scoffed. "You're serving his favorite dish and acting like he's about to walk through that door. You're delusional, Mom." Emily tried to calm him down, but he wasn't done. He turned to me. "And what about you, Jake? You're just sitting there like a good little soldier, pretending this isn't pathetic. You always take her side. Always." I clenched my fists under the table. "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just trying to eat dinner without it turning into a war zone." But Tyler wasn't hearing it. He slammed his fork down, the sound echoing off the walls. This family has been broken for years. And you know what? It's not just Dad's fault. It's hers. She never stopped him, never stood up for us, never cared enough to actually fight for this family. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and I saw Emily's hands shaking as she reached for a glass of water. Something inside me snapped. "You think you're the only one who's angry?" I shouted, finally pushing back from the table. "I've been angry since I was 12 years old, Tyler. Angry that Dad left. Angry that Mom checked out. Angry that you got to screw up while I had to hold everything together. Don't you dare act like you're the only one who sees the cracks." The room went dead silent. Mom whispered, "Jake," like my name was a prayer she'd forgotten how to say. But Tyler just smirked. There it is. Finally, the golden boy cracks. "Maybe now you'll admit that you're just as messed up as the rest of us." I wanted to punch him. God, I wanted to break something. Instead, I walked out. The screen door slammed behind me, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. I stood on the porch, chest heaving, staring out at the streetlights. For the first time in years, I said the words out loud. This family is falling apart. Emily followed me outside a few minutes later. Her eyes were red, her voice shaky. You shouldn't have left her in there alone. She's crying. I ran a hand over my face. She always cries. And then what? Nothing changes. We just do this again next month. Emily hesitated, then said something that hit me harder than Tyler's insults ever could. Maybe nothing changes because you keep running away. You leave her with Tyler. You leave me to pick up the pieces. And then you come back just long enough to remind us how angry you are. That cut deep. Because it was true. I'd spent years convincing myself I was the only one holding this family together. But maybe, just maybe, I've been part of the problem too. That night, I didn't go back inside. I got in my car, drove aimlessly for hours, and ended up parked outside the old baseball field where Dad used to take me. I sat there until sunrise, staring at the empty bleachers, trying to figure out how the hell we got here. By the time I finally went home, my phone was full of missed calls from Emily. One text stood out among the rest. You can keep walking away, Jake. But one day, she won't be here to come back to. And for the first time, I realized Emily might be right. I didn't sleep that night. By the time the sun rose, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. My phone buzzed nonstop with texts from Emily, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Every word I'd said at that dinner replayed in my head like a loop I couldn't shut off. When I finally walked through my apartment door, it was nearly 8 a.m. The place was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge. I collapsed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell I'd gone from being the peacekeeper to blowing up at my entire family in one night. The truth is, I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of being the glue that didn't actually hold anything together. I tried to distract myself, made coffee, turned on the TV, but the words from Emily's text haunted me. One day, she won't be here to come back to. So I called her. She picked up on the first ring. Jake. Her voice was sharp, like she'd been waiting all night. I'm sorry, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. I didn't mean to make things worse. There was a long pause. Then she said, You didn't just make it worse. You left her. You don't understand how hard it is for her, Jake. She's not perfect, but she's trying. That stung, mostly because Emily had always defended Mom, and I'd always resented it. But something in her tone made me shut up and just listen. She sat there after you walked out, just staring at that casserole. Tyler stormed off, of course. But she didn't move. She just cried, Jake. Not like she was angry. Like she was hollow. I pinched the bridge of my nose. I don't know how to fix this, and maybe stop trying to fix it, she said softly. Just show up, even if it's messy. Especially when it's messy. That sentence rattled in my brain all day. By evening, I drove back to Mom's house. My stomach was twisted, my palms sweaty, like I was walking into a courtroom. When I pulled in the driveway, her car was still there. The lights inside the house glowed warm against the early dusk. I knocked, even though I had a key. Mom opened the door slowly. Her eyes were swollen, makeup smudged. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside so I could come in. The table was still a mess from the night before. Dishes piled up, casserole half-eaten. It was like time had frozen. I'm sorry, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. She looked at me, her lips trembling. I don't need you to fix everything, Jake. I just need you here. And for the first time in years, I hugged her, really hugged her. She clung to me like I was the only thing keeping her standing. We didn't say much after that. I helped her clean the table, wash the dishes, pack up the leftovers. It was quiet, but not the suffocating kind. It was healing. Over the next few weeks, things didn't magically get better. Tyler was still angry. Emily still played mediator. Mom still cried sometimes. But I stopped running. I showed up for dinners, even when they turned into arguments. I sat with Mom when she felt lonely. I answered Emily's calls instead of ignoring them. It wasn't perfect. Hell, it was far from perfect, but it was real. And maybe that was enough. One night, a month later, Emily pulled me aside after dinner. You're different, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Different how? She smiled, tired but genuine. You're here. That's all I ever wanted. And maybe she was right. Maybe it wasn't about fixing the cracks, but learning to live with them. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up again and again, even when it hurts. So yeah, maybe the night it all blew up started with a casserole. But in a strange way, maybe that casserole was what finally forced us to stop pretending. And if you're still here listening, thanks for sticking through this with me. If you want more stories like this, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around for the next one. You don't want to miss it. So here's the thing. I never thought I'd be the guy airing his dirty laundry to strangers on the internet. But after what happened, I honestly don't know who else to talk to. Everyone close to me has either picked a side or gone radio silent. And I'm just sitting here wondering if I completely lost my mind or if I finally seen my family for who they really are. It all started about 3 months ago when my dad decided he was going to retire early. My dad has always been the kind of man who thrived on control, military background, strict routines. Everything had to be done his way or it wasn't done at all. Growing up with him was complicated. He wasn't abusive in the traditional sense, but he had this way of making every mistake feel like the end of the world. If you didn't fold the towels the way he wanted, he'd unfold them in front of you and make you start again. If your grades slipped even one letter, you weren't allowed out of the house until you proved yourself again. Now, as a kid, I thought that was just normal. You only realize as an adult how much those little things stick to you. I still catch myself refolding towels when I'm anxious. I still panic if I mispronounce a word in front of people. It's like his voice lives rent-free in the back of my head, waiting to pounce. Anyway, when he retired, he decided he wanted to fix our family. His words, not mine. He called this big family meeting at their house. Me, my 2 sisters, my mom, and of course him at the head of the table like a general addressing his troops. He said he didn't like how distant we'd all become, how the family wasn't as strong as it used to be. Which, okay, fair point. We weren't exactly the Brady Bunch. But then he followed it up with, I'm going to start hosting mandatory Sunday dinners. Mandatory. That word right there set the tone for everything that followed. At first, I went along with it. It was just dinner once a week, right? How bad could it be? Mom would cook, my sisters would bring dessert, we'd all sit around the table like some kind of sitcom family. Maybe awkward, sure, but manageable. The first couple of weeks weren't terrible. I kept my head down, made small talk, try not to get sucked into Dad's lectures about how kids these days don't understand hard work. My sisters, Rachel and Lauren, mostly stared at their phones when he went on rants, and Mom just smiled politely like she always does. But by the 4th dinner, things started to unravel. Dad had been drinking more since retirement. Nothing too wild, but enough to loosen his tongue. That night, he started going off about Rachel's boyfriend. How he was a waste of space because he didn't have a real job. Rachel snapped back that her boyfriend was working in graphic design and made good money freelancing. Dad laughed in her face, told her freelancing was just a fancy word for unemployment, and that she was wasting her time with him. Rachel stormed out before dessert, and the rest of us just sat there in silence while Dad smirked like he'd won some kind of battle. That was the first crack. The next Sunday, Lauren refused to come. She texted me saying she wasn't going to sit there and be lectured about how she's too old to be single. Dad went on a 20-minute rant at the table about how young people don't value family anymore, and Mom just kept topping up his glass like nothing was wrong. By week 6, it was just me, Mom, and Dad. And that's when the Real explosion happened. He started it on me this time. Said I wasn't stepping up as the oldest, and that it was my job to hold the family together now that he was retired. I asked him what that even meant, and he went on this tirade about how I should be checking in on my sisters, making sure they respect tradition, and helping Mom with her duties. Her duties. Like it was still the 1950s. Something in me snapped. I told him he didn't get to criticize us for not showing up when he was the reason we all dreaded being in the same room. I said maybe if he'd spent less time barking orders and more time actually listening, we wouldn't be so distant. The silence that followed was brutal. Mom stared at her plate like she wanted to disappear. Dad's face went red, then purple, then this cold, icy calm settled over him. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said, "You sound just like your sisters. Ungrateful. Weak." I stood up, ready to leave, but Mom grabbed my hand. Her grip was shaking. She whispered, "Don't go. Please, just try." And that's the part that broke me. Because my whole life, Mom has been the buffer. The soft place to land when Dad's storms hit. And seeing her beg me to stay, even when I felt like I was suffocating, made me feel like I was betraying her by walking out. So I sat back down. I stayed, and I swallowed every angry word burning in my throat. But later that night, lying awake in my apartment, I realized something. I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if showing up every Sunday, letting him tear us down piece by piece, is actually helping anyone. Maybe it's just another way he keeps control, even now that we're all adults. And here's the worst part. Part of me still wants his approval. Part of me still wants to hear him say, "I'm proud of you." And I hate myself for it. So that's where I'm at. Stuck between wanting to protect my mom, wanting to shield my sisters, and wanting to finally cut myself free from the grip my dad still has on all of us. I don't know if I'm the asshole here for pushing back, or if I'm finally doing the right thing. But it feels like every move I make is a losing game. The week after that fight, I told myself I wasn't going to go back. I swore up and down that I was done with the whole mandatory dinner thing. I even typed out a text to my mom saying, "I need a break. I love you, but I can't sit through another one of his rants." But then Sunday rolled around, and there I was, pulling into my parents' driveway like clockwork. I don't know if it was guilt or habit or just that same pull I've always felt. The need to keep the peace, to protect my mom from sitting across the table from Malone. But there I was, parking my car and staring at the front door, already bracing for whatever storm was waiting inside. That night was different, though. My sister showed up too. Rachel walked in with her boyfriend in tow, and Lauren came with this determined look on her face, like she was gearing up for battle. When we all sat down, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dad was already in one of his moods, sipping whiskey before dinner even started. But this time, he didn't go after us one by one. He looked at the table, at all of us sitting there, and said, "I don't know what's happened to this family. You're all so quick to judge me, to walk away when things get uncomfortable. Do you know how many families would kill for dinners like this?" Lauren actually laughed, this sharp, bitter laugh that didn't sound like her at all. "Dad, do you hear yourself? Most families want to see each other. They don't have to be forced into it." He slammed his glass down so hard some spilled over the rim. Forced? You think sitting down to a meal once a week is forced? This is what families do. This is how we stay strong. Rachel jumped in then. Strong? You call this strong? Every week, it's just you picking us apart. You don't ask about my job. You insult my boyfriend. You tell Lauren she's a failure for not being married yet. And you act like mom's only purpose in life is cooking her dinner. That's not strong, Dad. That's control. For the first time, I saw something flicker across his face. Not anger, not pride. Just this flash of something almost like fear. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that cold, familiar glare. "You ungrateful brats," he said, his voice low but shaking. "Everything I've ever done was to make sure you had discipline, respect, order. And this is how you repay me? By ganging up on me like I'm the enemy?" Nobody said anything, not even Mom. She just stared at the table, her knuckles white around her fork. That silence stretched on until it was unbearable. And then, without planning it, I said, "Maybe you are the enemy, Dad." The word just hung there. Heavy. Dangerous. He froze. His jaw clenched, his fists tightening like he was trying to stop himself from exploding. Then, in the calmest voice I'd ever heard him use, he said, "Get out." At first, I thought he meant me. But then he stood up and pointed at Rachel's boyfriend. "You, get out of my house." Rachel stood too. "If he goes, I go." Dad didn't blink. "Then go." She grabbed her boyfriend's hand and walked out. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Lauren stood up next. "I'm done too. I can't keep pretending this is normal." She walked out, and just like that, it was down to me, Mom, and Dad again. Mom whispered, "Please, can't we just..." But Dad cut her off. "If they don't want to be part of this family, then they're no daughters of mine." That was it. That was the moment something inside me finally broke. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and said, "Then maybe I'm not your son either." His face went blank. Not angry, not hurt, just blank. Like he'd already decided I was dead to him. I walked out. I didn't look back. The days after that were chaos. Rachel called me crying, saying she couldn't believe he'd disown us so easily. Lauren sent me a text saying she felt relieved, but also sick, like a weight had lifted but left a bruise behind. Mom didn't call. When I finally caved and called her, she sounded exhausted. She said he didn't mean it. He was just angry, but I could tell even she didn't believe it. She begged me to come back next Sunday to try again. I told her I couldn't. Not this time. And here's the kicker. Dad still sent out a group text that Saturday. Dinner at 6. Don't be late. Like nothing had happened. Rachel ignored it. Lauren ignored it. I stared at it for hours before finally typing, "I'm not coming. Not anymore." No response. It's been 3 weeks since then. No calls from him. No texts. Just silence. And part of me feels free for the first time in my life. But another part of me feels this deep, gnawing guilt, like I abandoned my mom, like I broke something that can never be fixed. Sometimes I lie awake at night, replaying it all, wondering if I could have handled it differently. Wondering if maybe I'm the one who tore the family apart. But then I remember the way his face looked when I said maybe he was the enemy. And I realized I wasn't lying. For years, he made us believe love had to be earned through obedience. That respect meant fear. That family was about control, not care. And I don't want that anymore. I don't want to pass it on if I ever have kids of my own. So maybe I am the villain in his story. Maybe I'm the one who broke tradition. But for once, I think I might finally be the hero in mine. If you made it all the way through this, thank you for listening. If you felt something in my story, stick around. I've got more to share, and I'd love for you to be here for the next one. And don't forget, it helps more than you know when you like this, subscribe to the channel, and check out the other stories waiting for you. Some families have their drama behind closed doors. Mine are spilled out into every holiday, every Sunday dinner, every family gathering my parents insisted on hosting. People used to say we looked picture perfect from the outside, but inside those walls it was like sitting on a landmine. The biggest blast came last fall when my younger sister dropped a bomb of her own. She announced she was getting married. You'd think a wedding would bring everyone together, right? Celebrations, champagne, family bonding. Yeah, not in our house. It started with the venue. My sister wanted something small, intimate, something by the water. My dad, on the other hand, insisted on booking a huge country club. One of those places with chandeliers and a golf course, the kind of venue that screamed, "Look at us, we've got money." My sister shut it down immediately, saying, "This is my wedding, Dad, not your business deal." That should have been the end of it. But my dad never lets anything go. Every phone call turned into an argument. Every dinner was him sneaking in comments like, "When people think of our family, they expect class," or "You don't want to embarrass yourself in some shabby little barn." The problem was, he didn't just argue with her. He dragged the rest of us into it. He cornered me after one dinner and said, "Talk some sense into your sister. She'll listen to you. Remind her who's paying for this wedding." That last line, it stuck with me because he wasn't offering, he was controlling. He dangled money like a leash, like if she wanted his support, she had to play by his rules. The fighting got so bad my sister called me one night sobbing. "I don't even know if I want him there," she said. "It's supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and all I can think about is how he's going to ruin it." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her to elope, to just run away and cut the whole mess out of the equation. But another part of me thought about Mom, how badly she wanted us all together, how she'd been trying to play referee for months, even though it was tearing her apart. Then, right when things couldn't get more tense, I had my own crisis. My long-term girlfriend and I broke up. It wasn't explosive, not like my family's fights. It was worse in a way because it was quiet. We just sat there one night, realizing we didn't love each other the way we used to, and decided to end it. It wrecked me. I'd been with her for almost 5 years. I thought she was the one. And while I was trying to patch up my own life, my family kept dragging me into theirs. My dad still called, pushing me to get your sister under control. My mom kept texting me, please, just keep the peace. And my sister leaned on me like I was the only person who understood her side. It felt like I was being split down the middle. Half of me grieving the life I thought I'd have, half of me holding up the pieces of a family that didn't even know how broken it was. Things reached a boiling point at Sunday dinner 2 weeks before the wedding. We all sat down at the table, and within 10 minutes, Dad brought it up again. So, have you reconsidered the venue? He asked, stabbing his fork into a steak like it was a weapon. My sister put her fork down, looked him straight in the eye, and said, Dad, I already told you no. It's my wedding, not yours. He leaned back, smirking. Not if I'm paying for it. That's when I lost it. I slammed my hand on the table so hard the silverware rattled. Enough. Do you even hear yourself? You're not helping. You're bullying her. The room went dead silent. My mom's eyes went wide. My sister stared at me like she couldn't believe I spoke up, and my dad, he just glared at me. Cold, calculated. Watch your mouth, he said. Don't forget who raised you. I didn't flinch. Yeah, I remember. And I also remember all the times you thought respect meant control. I'm done with that. That dinner ended in chaos. My sister stormed out. My mom begged us to stop. And my dad just sat there, silent, like a king watching his empire fall apart. I drove home that night shaking, part from adrenaline, part from heartbreak. Because in one night, I realized 2 things. My relationship was over, and maybe, just maybe, my family was too. After that dinner blow up, the silence in our family was louder than shouting had ever been. No group texts, no check-ins, not even the passive-aggressive calls from my dad. It was like we'd all retreated into our corners, nursing our own wounds. I didn't know what my sister was planning anymore. I figured she was probably crying into her fiancé's shoulder every night, wondering if it was even worth having a wedding when half the family felt like enemies. Then, out of the blue, she showed up at my apartment. No warning, just knocked on my door one night with a bottle of wine in one hand and a folder of wedding plans in the other. I can't do this alone, she said. Her voice cracked on that last word. So we sat on my couch, sifting through papers and Pinterest boards. She showed me the barn she'd booked, this charming place with string lights and big wooden doors. It feels like me, she whispered, almost like she was apologizing for it. I looked at her, at the fear in her eyes, and I realized she wasn't just fighting Dad. She was fighting decades of his voice in her head. That voice that told us nothing we did was good enough unless it matched his version of perfect. I leaned forward. You don't owe him your happiness. Not for money, not for approval, not for anything. She nodded, tears spilling down her face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe we were on the same team. But then came the curveball. 2 days later, Mom called me in secret. Her voice was low, like she was hiding in a closet. Your father's furious, she said. He's talking about not going to the wedding at all. He says if she won't listen to him, she doesn't deserve his support. I felt a cold pit in my stomach. Part of me thought, good, stay away then. But another part of me, the part that still wanted a family, knew how much that would hurt my sister. So I made a choice, a risky one. I drove to my parents' house that night and sat down with Dad in his study. He didn't even look at me when I walked in, just kept flipping through some paperwork. I took a deep breath. Dad, you're about to lose her. You're about to lose both of us. He set his papers down slowly, finally meeting my eyes. You think you know better than me? No, I said, my voice steady. I just know that controlling her doesn't make her respect you. It makes her resent you. Do you really want to be the reason she remembers her wedding as the worst day of her life? For a moment, I thought he might explode. His face turned red, his jaw clenched. But then something shifted. His shoulders dropped, and he let out a long sigh. You don't understand, he muttered. I just wanted it to be perfect. And there it was, the crack in his armor. The part of him that wasn't a tyrant, but a father who didn't know how to show love without turning it into control. The wedding day came faster than I expected. The barn was exactly as my sister dreamed. rustic but beautiful, with soft lights hanging overhead and the smell of fresh hay in the air. Guests filled the seats, laughter buzzing like electricity. When I saw my dad walk in, wearing his best suit and actually smiling, I felt a knot in my chest loosen. He sat down quietly. No fuss, no speeches, no drama. Just a father there to watch his daughter get married. And my sister? She looked radiant. She walked down that aisle glowing, not because of the dress or the flowers, but because she finally felt free. I clapped louder than anyone when they said, "I do." Afterward, when the music started and people hit the dance floor, I stepped outside for some air. The cool night breeze hit me, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel weighed down. My own breakup still stung. Some nights, I still woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. But watching my sister fight for her happiness reminded me of something important. Love isn't about control. It's about choice. I don't know what the future holds for me. Maybe I'll find someone new. Maybe I won't. But I do know this. I won't settle for a love that feels like chains. And as I stood there, watching my family laugh inside, I realized we weren't fixed, not completely. But we were healing. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. If you felt this story, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and don't forget to check out the other stories waiting for you. It keeps our little storytelling family growing.